This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so welcome everyone. I know that there are some new folks here today who I haven't met before, so it's great to see new faces. And for those who don't know a lot about the Quality Enhancement Plan, our big initiative is to include more uh, writing as a process throughout all the disciplines. Um, and the big part of that is making classes writing intensive within students' major courses. Um, so Dr. Doyle has actually taught a few of our writing intensive courses and has sat on our ally committee. So it's great to hear her present today. And we have these faculty learning communities about once per session. So now that I have access to way more listservs than I had before, you'll be seeing more meeting invites from me if you haven't in the past. So um, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Jen.
All right, thank you. Let me switch my screen around. I cannot see you when I'm sharing my PowerPoint, so if you do have a question, please don't hesitate to say something in the chat or just go ahead and speak up. We do not have to wait for questions until the end. So thank you so much for being here today. I know it's the last day of session 3, and so all the hectic grading that needs to be done and everything. So thank you for taking your time today to listen to something that I'm really excited about. I started scaffolding these writing assignments a couple years ago, and I think I keep adding new scaffolds in my assignments almost every time now that I teach it. So I want to start with a big thank you, because this truly does take a village. And if I am missing a name on this slide, please accept my apologies. But I really could not have done this or made it these assignments what they are without the QEP library staff and the writing center. If you don't already use those for your writing courses or your regular courses with your writing assignments, I cannot encourage that enough. Great help. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Because when I first started teaching writing assignments in my biology courses, I'm a biologist, by the way, so my courses are very biology course content heavy. I made all sorts of these rookie mistakes, because when I assigned papers, I assigned them the way that when I was an undergrad biology major, how those papers were assigned. Basically, you got a paper assignment, it was due this day, you had to be sure it was turned in that day. Really, there was no concept of peer review as an undergrad, at least for me, there was not. So I really didn't feel, or I really never encountered kind of a peer review, even though it wasn't a formal peer review, until I did get to graduate school, because you always had somebody read your work before you turned it in. I would never give a seminar without practicing it in front of my peers. So peer review is such an important piece of academia and the job market and everything. So I'm excited that I can now put these peer review aspects into my writing assignments. And really, the reason I started making these changes was because of the QEP. I never really liked assigning written assignments because I didn't like grading them, because I didn't feel that students were quite grasping what the assignment was asking for. So I am so thankful with the QEP. I learned better ways to do this. I'm still evolving with my writing assignments. What it really made me aware of is that writing is so much of a process. And yeah, I knew about that process, having to write, in undergrad and grad school, but it's more of that metacognition. You think about thinking. Well, I had to think about writing, and all of these steps that I was taking in my writing process. How could I share those steps with my students? So the scaffolding assignment allows you to share those steps of the writing process with your students. So today I'm going to highlight, first I'm going to highlight the scaffolding writing assignment that I assigned in my biology seminar class. This is just wrapping up, so I'm in the process of reading these lit reviews. The last seminar presentation was literally 20 minutes ago. And this scaffolding assignment was more intuitive simply because the biology seminar course is mostly seniors. There's not biology concepts that I have to share. The learning goals of biology seminar is to just improve scientific literacy for these students as they transition from an undergrad to a grad school or professional school. And so the final project with biology seminar, what we're trying to get to at the end is that they write a comprehensive lit review on a topic of their choice. And they also have to give a 30-minute-ish seminar on that topic. So that's kind of like the goal for the end of the course. When I described the assignments in biology seminar, something we started to do last year, really out of necessity, but it's worked out so well, I want to keep it. Biology seminar, mostly seniors, is held at the same time as our Bio 150 problem solving in natural science course. The Bio 150 course is a first year student course. These students in Bio 150 are just starting their undergraduate career. They've just taken maybe 1-2 biology or other natural science courses. So problem solving really is like a freshman seminar course, except we do a little bit more career development and metacognition techniques. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is because as I go through parts of the scaffolding assignment in biology seminar, parts of those scaffolds are shared with this Bio 150 course. So as I'm describing the assignment, if you see something that is highlighted, that means that that component is done with the first year students. It's been really fun to watch that because we have our seniors in first year together working on a project. If we have time, I also want to describe some scaffolding writing assignment I do in my genetics course. Genetics, unlike biology seminar, I have so many concepts that I have to be sure that students get. So, they're taking the genetics course to learn genetic concepts. However, we do have a decent sized paper due in genetics covering a genetic disorder of the student's choice. So hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about how I scaffold an assignment in a content heavy class. But first I'm going to focus on biology seminar because the goal of that class really is to become a better writer, become a better reader, and to become a better seminar giver. So with biology seminar, as I said before, the final paper is really our end goal. I'm visual. I like to think of biological entities when I visualize different things. So if the final paper and final presentation is the tree trunks, all of these bulleted points over here are these main branches. I'm going to go through those and we're going to talk about some of these smaller side branches that fit within these larger scaffolds. So there's a lot of graded material along the way. So topic choice finding, scientific articles, reading those articles, organizing the information, rough draft and final draft. So first, with the topic choice, the biology seminar students get to choose their particular topic. And so I give them a pre-assignment that they need to come to the very first class already picking or already having 3 potential topics that they want to write about. That very first class, we actually spend some time meeting with the freshman 150 course. And the seminar students have to pitch 3 possible topics. So this is an informal, stand in front of the class, describe 3 possible topics that they want to write about. And their peers vote on which topic they think is the one that they should do. So the topics are chosen by the students, but also input from their peers to pick the topic that they want. And so that's the very first class. And I want my students to be comfortable getting up in front of others and talking off the cuff. Very second day, thank you, Leah Cover. This is library time. And they go over to the library with Leah and talk about topic development, further topic development. Get a review on how to use the library databases, looking at, a research article is different than a literature review article, looking at the different sources and talking about source choice. Third day, we discuss this topic, we kind of debrief. And so they describe again what their topic is, how it shifted and changed. And then I let them know that, topics evolve as you work through a lit review, and that is absolutely okay. You're not set in stone with your topic right now. You have a starting place, and we talk about the evolution of that topic. Any questions about the topic choice? It's a lot of fun to see them pitch these 3 and then to have their peers vote on what topic they think is going to be the best. All right. Well, the next is the finding the articles. So I make them start their literature cited page as they are finding the articles. I want them to pick a format. In natural science, there's no specific standardized format like APA or MLA. It all is different depending on the journal. So I have them pick a format for their literature cited page and then stick with it. And so we start creating this literature cited page right away. They need to, part of the process of writing a literature review is keeping your literature organized. And we'll talk further organization in a moment. And we will peer review about 2 weeks into the process to look at the sources that they have gathered so far. We check it for consistent formatting. We also check it for source accuracy. So are they getting enough articles from, the strong journals? All right. And so, finding scientific articles is the easy part. You actually have to read them. And reading these journal articles obviously takes a long time. Sometimes the jargon sometimes in these articles are pretty mind-numbing. So we spend a lot of time on how to best read a research article. So these are describing a particular experiment. And I usually will pick I pick a journal article that was published within the last month of when we meet together for this class. And we read this journal article together because there is definitely a methodology on how to attack these journal articles. You wouldn't want to read it from beginning to end. There's certain ways to look at the figures and so forth. So there's different tactics, and we talk about those different tactics. And so a side branch of this larger branch is we have each of the seminar students pick one of the articles that they have found so far that they think is a strong article that they will use as a resource for their final paper. And they pick that article and they do what is known as a journal club presentation. And so in graduate school, you know, it's very common that a newly published article, you would be assigned that article to present that article in front of your class or your lab group. And so I get them used to these journal clubs. Now, what's fun about this is the students get to pick which article to choose because they know that what comes next is I have these senior students come together in small groups with that freshman class, and the seniors lead a small group of those first year students in reading the article that they will use for their journal club presentation. These small groups are really fun to watch because it's just that dynamic between the first year students and the senior students. The senior students, they just amaze me. They take it seriously, but they have fun, and they share a lot of good tips with these freshman students who are just now starting to read their first scientific article, which those are very intimidating. So I get the seniors involved in teaching this, teaching these first year students. Again, these are all kind of graded components that will lead to this final paper. And part of this small group is I want this to be an active small group. And so there is an assignment in both the freshman and senior classes, which is, I call it an annotated bibliography. You know, annotated bibliographies can look like a lot of things, but this is kind of like your article notes. And so they work on an annotated bibliography together based on the article that they read in the small group. And so just what this looks like, this is one that was just turned in. The small group read a article about P. gingivitis in actually canines. And so just to break down the article into keywords, if there is a hypothesis, experimental design, and just to bullet point some of the main results and significance. So writing a literature review, you know, when you gather all these journal articles, it's so easy to forget, oh, where did that piece of information come from? What journal article did I get that from? And I really encourage students to make these notes on the resources that they are going to use in their paper, because when they sit down for the outline or rough draft, having these are very convenient. So this is an assignment that I also give them. Any questions so far? All right, so it's a lot of information that they're gathering. And I found in the past, before I started really breaking down the paper assignment into smaller bits, I found that the organization was all over the place, so that people were repeating things, people were putting topics before adequate background. And so really the single most valuable piece of this scaffolding assignment that I think I added was that I make them write out a paper outline. And this paper outline, I encourage them to put the citations for the particular piece that they are outlining. And so with this paper outline, and they've even remarked, it really helps them with this organization. It helps with that paper flow, right? And they have to write this paper outline, then they need to sit down and explain it to their peers. So we do a paper outline peer review. I found that this is really getting at those more higher order aspects of good writing with the paper flow, having adequate sources for what you're trying to say. Because when you write, your thoughts down in that outline, you can see, oh, this sub theme is a little bit weaker than this sub theme. Maybe I should go back and try to find some resources for the weaker sub theme. And then really it's nice to see with the order of the sub themes that you want to put in your paper. Students have really responded well to this paper outline peer review. And I just found that a lot of times my students don't jot down what they want to put in a writing assignment before they actually write it. That was one of those things I never learned in a class, but I just started instinctively doing, just writing down my thoughts before I actually wrote the writing assignment. And I'm hoping that my students, because they like this part so much, that maybe in their future writing assignments, even if it's not, asked for, that they will sit down and write an outline before they write the rough draft. And once they get this paper outline draft, they have a really good idea of what their project, their final paper is going to start looking like. And remember, part of, it's not writing, but part of their big project is writing or is presenting a seminar. And we also peer review a seminar. So we make the students come in a week before the seminars are given to do a dress rehearsal. So again, this is another scaffold to this main project. Even though it's not writing, it's still a kind of writing, right? So writing a proper seminar, knowing what to write and what not to write on those PowerPoint slides. It's really good to get more practice with that. So this is a little side. We do peer review the seminar around the time that the paper outline is peer reviewed. And then the final bits are pretty traditional. So then by this point, they can use that paper outline and the literature cited that they've already gotten together and alphabetized, and they can sit down and write their rough draft. And of course, we peer review that rough draft. That's looking for more grammatical, kind of more lower level writing. But it's nice to peer review these because I find that students have probably the most difficult time with the introduction and the conclusion. Those are probably the more difficult parts to write, just to write them well. So this rough draft really helps with that particular component of their final paper. And then finally, they have their final paper. And so this is due the last week. We also do our final seminar presentations. And really, I'm reading these final papers now for this year. And even in years past, once I've started breaking the writing down into parts, once the student turns in their final paper, they're really good. It's hard to even find mistakes. I mean, besides the average typo here or there, but they have really produced a strong product. And I think the students feel that too. They're really proud of their work. Just to give you some ideas, these are some past titles of some of these final papers. Being Spalding, a lot of the topics deal with kind of health, because we have a lot of students pre-dental, pre-med, pre-vet. We get quite a handful of really interesting, at least they're interesting. I find them interesting anyway, but kind of the canine topics or other non-human animals. We've also had topics on like CRISPR-Cas9, the gene editing tool. So these students really do produce something that they can be proud of. And And I really am blown away since I have started breaking down that paper into smaller bits. The final grading is so easy. I mean, I can read through them and it's just good work. So it seems like I'm adding more work, but in the long run, I think net workload, so to speak, of being an instructor, I think it lessens it. And the students are getting more out of this assignment. They're not just waiting to the last night or the last couple nights. They can't, because throughout that whole 6 weeks, we have been building so that when they sit down to write their final paper, they're really putting together a really nice piece of work. Are there any questions about the biology seminar class?
I have a question. This is Lisa.
Yes. Hi, Lisa.
So with you, because you have a lot of peer review in here, and I guess you probably have more time within this class since it's the main focus. I'm just kind of curious, like what the peer review looks like if that's something that's happening in class, or like, do you just assign peer review how you can in Canvas, or what does that look like?
All of the above. So like the literature cited, for example, peer review, that doesn't take long. We do that in small groups in class. This class is pretty small. Last year, the peer review was online because of COVID. This year, the Writing Center has been able to meet with the biology seminar students during class time to do the peer reviews. And sometimes in other courses, I do peer review through Canvas by, using Canvas to assign peers to review their classmates' work. And then also the Writing Center, I've added their GAs to my Canvas course as like a TA. And so the Writing Center can go directly into the student submissions in Canvas and give really nice feedback to those students directly in the Canvas submission. So I've used all of those ways. I mean, me personally, if I had to pick one, I think the in-person small group is probably the most valuable, simply because, well, we all know that it's easier to interact with one another in person instead of through a screen. So that's the way I prefer, but they all work, I think. Did that answer it?
Thanks.
Any others? Okay, as Lisa alluded to, bioseminar, because we're not working on course content, I do have more time to spend a whole class at the Writing Center peer reviewing outlines. So I understand that can be difficult sometimes to apply to other courses. And so that's why I thought it would be nice for me to share quickly on how I'm using the scaffolding in the genetics course. And this is a newer scaffold assignment, so this definitely is evolving. I'm going to share with you what I did last year. And due to COVID, genetics was hybrid. So we met sometimes in person, but some people weren't in person, so I was live streaming. And then other times we did purely asynchronous online. So it was a mix. Hopefully by the time I teach this in session 6 this year, it could be more in-person aspects. So like I said, the trick with genetics is that we can barely get through the course content in those 6 weeks, that we don't have a lot of class time really to add this scaffolding idea. But, I'm doing my best. So a large writing assignment in genetics is a genetic disorder paper, larger. So usually they range between 6 to 7 pages by the time they finish the paper. This one is more written out in that I want them to be sure that they are covering different aspects of the genetic disorder. So they have freedom in that they get to pick the genetic disorder that they write about. But they don't have the freedom for deciding what to include or not include. I want to be sure that these bulleted points are covered in their paper. So with genetics, I'm going to talk specifically about the scaffolding of the writing assignment. And so the writing assignment, the final draft, is due in week 6. But we start the genetic disorder paper in week 1. We have a component due in week 3, and then week 5 is more traditional rough draft for that final draft in week 6. So week 1 with the topic discussion. Last year, this was a discussion board on Canvas due to the hybrid nature of the course. I'm on the fence. I'm really thinking about maybe taking some class time to share this. And so the discussion is that they have to pick a genetic disorder. And it can be any mammalian disorder. So we do have some pre-vet students who write a genetic disorder paper on a canine genetic disorder, for example, a feline genetic disorder. And so students have the freedom to pick a genetic disorder that they want to write more about. And so these are just, I know this is a lot of words, but these are 3 sample posts from students in the past. You know, we range from the very common genetic disorders, such as sickle cell anemia, to more rare disorders like Apert syndrome. This student, it was interesting, was working in a clinic with a patient who had Apert syndrome. So this particular student had real life experience with someone with this disorder. Here's another one, a canine example, brachiocephalic syndrome in canines. So at this point, they're just picking a disorder. We haven't really covered genetic course topics. You know, this is week 1, so it's the basic of the basic. But by this point, they have decided on what genetic disorder they're going to write about. They're going to start reading about the genetic disorder that they chose. And so they're going to start seeing familiar genetic terms that we're going to start covering in those first couple weeks of class. And so between week 1 and week 3, again, it is very traditional genetics course, laying kind of the foundation and discussing the vocabulary of genetics and hopefully getting them more familiar with the vocab words. So by this point in week 3, again, this was a discussion board last year. I really would love to move this more in person this year. But this week 3 assignment, they need to report to the rest of the class on the actual genetic cause. So what is the mutation and which gene or genes is mutated? And because that gene is mutated, how is that going to lead to a faulty protein? And how does that lead to symptoms? And so we have them start to get a little bit more nitty-gritty genetics. They can't just say this a particular symptom. They have to relate it back to how the gene mutation is causing the symptom. I also have them start to play around with databases. We use OMIM for this particular assignment, which is a National Institute of Health database that anyone can get a hold of. And then they have to describe like where the gene is located. Then after this discussion post is made, then the next couple of days, they need to reply to a classmate's post. And I got this tip from one of these lunchtime discussions. And so thank you for, you know who you are. You gave me this tip and it's great. So the students have to reply to a classmate's post by giving their classmates a good website for the classmates disorder. So what this does is it's going to make a student look at someone else's chosen disorder topic and find a legitimate website. And there are a lot of legitimate websites through Mayo Clinic, National Institute of Health, for example. And then they share that website that they have found with the student who is actually doing that genetic disorder topic. So it makes a student dig a little bit deeper into a different genetic disorder. It also, they might not be aware that they are doing this, but they have to be sure that they are looking at legitimate websites. So they're learning, you know, to weigh the source that they give. So we get some really nice ones. So this is just an example. So this is a student who wrote about Fragile X syndrome, talking about, you know, what chromosome it's on, the mutated gene, how that causes the protein that helps in the development of synapses in the nervous system. They've looked at that entry in the database, and they have found which chromosome this gene is located on and where it is located on the chromosome. So by doing this, they're pulling these core genetic topics that we have been talking about and making it very real world. So this is a student writing about their own genetic disorder topic. Here is a classmate giving a suggested resource for that student. And oops, sorry. And then, so you can see that they gave a National Institute of Health fact sheet, which is considered a reputable source. All right. And so then by this point, the students have really throughout this time had to think about their genetic disorder. They've had to answer questions about their genetic disorder. And then so in week 5, their rough draft is due. And I give a rubric for the students to grade their classmates' rough draft. I find that it causes the student, or it makes the student actually write more meaningful information because they are breaking it down into pieces. So, you know, maybe a student who's doing a peer review thinks that the genetic cause, it's missing some more information, or that it could be elaborated on further. The peer reviewer can actually write their comments in that particular section. Just like myself, when I'm grading writing assignments, I like to rely on rubrics. I found that students like a rubric to base their peer review on. And so I give them some points for a strong peer review. I don't want a peer review that says, hey, yeah, good work. You know, it needs to be meaningful to be useful. And then week 6, their final disorder is due. And their, not their final disorder, the final disorder paper is due. And I use a rubric just like this, except the point value is different. And students have access to that, the rubric that will be used for the final draft. And so with that describes my scaffolding, 2 of my scaffolding assignments. The biology seminar is in the class that really doesn't have a lot of course content. We don't have exams. And then the genetic disorder paper is in the course that has tons of content, and we do have exams. So what I have found when breaking down the writing process into these individual steps, and each of these steps has a little bit of grade to, you know, assigned to it, so that students actually spend some time. The students are really instilling better writing habits. I'm I'm all about metacognition. You got to think about the process. So they're thinking about the process of writing. And then what does it take to make a strong final draft? I find that my students, especially by the time they are into that second peer review, they become more comfortable in it. They realize that it's not, you know, peer review isn't something that says, oh, you're wrong, you need to do this, this, and this. You know, you need to approach peer review as an opportunity to grow or to become a better writer or to have a better paper. And so I really see my students becoming more comfortable with peer review, more comfortable asking for help. And so I definitely think that the scaffolding of the assignments helps with this comfort and this self-efficacy, I guess you could call it. And then we're getting better outcomes, you know, because the students literally cannot wait to the last minute because we have all those little pieces due well before the final paper is due. Students can't wait to the last minute, and they turn in better final drafts. So I think they're becoming better writers. And the last bullet point might be a little selfish, but I mean, it is really writing these or grading these written assignments. I would never thought 10 years ago I would say this, but it's fun because you know the work that the student has put into the final paper. And you're reading it and it flows. You're not stuck having to be like, well, what did I just read? And why is it in this part of the paper and not that part of the paper? You know, those pieces are already taken care of. So I think at the end, it reduces grading time and makes that time more enjoyable for you as the instructor. At least that's my personal opinion on it. So are there any questions? I'd be happy to describe any of the different pieces in more detail. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces. All right, there's faces. Okay. It's really strange talking to a screen that's just your PowerPoint presentation. So.
Hi, Jennifer. I was going to ask you if you would be willing to share, I know you shared it with me and it has been very valuable to me in my capstone, the worksheet that you use for students who are reviewing sources.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if Lizzie has that or not, but I found it very, very helpful. I, adjusted a little bit to fit my discipline, but I've used it in the capstone since, and we've had really good experience with it. So
yeah, was that the yeah, I have a few of those worksheets. You are welcome to all of them. If you wouldn't mind, after this showing me which particular one you're talking about, I'll be sure to send that one out. I find that students, they need that guidance. And so, yes, I'm happy to share anything that I have with anyone.
Yeah, and if you wanted to send it, your PowerPoint to me, Jen, as well as, any additional handouts, I'll be sending out a survey for this learning community so I can attach those things. And I'll also give everyone a link to where on the QEP website we store all of the archived materials from our workshops. So if you want to see former recordings of workshops or PowerPoints from those workshops, I'll give you that information.
I also have one other question about the outline. You were talking about having to outline the paper, and I wondered is that a very comprehensive outline? Is it just sort of a phrase outline? Could you talk with us a little bit more about
Absolutely. And I started to share one on the PowerPoint, but then I realized it was like a 6-page outline just because they had used bullet points and a lot of spacing. So it didn't share well via PowerPoint, but I'm happy to share a student example. How comprehensive the outline is, the freshman students have to do it on, they also have a scaffold writing assignment that I didn't talk about. And I find that those outlines, because these are kind of the first outlines that they're writing, really aren't as comprehensive. But by the time the students are in that biology seminar, I feel like they're nice, comprehensive outlines. Of course, I encourage it. It needs to be bulleted points, right? Because outlines, the purpose is not to write the paragraph, right? The outline is to get those key points that you want to be sure that you include. And I don't require it, but I encourage it as they're writing their outline, that they do put the citation for the source that pertains to that particular piece in their outline, because it just makes the rough draft writing so much nicer, right? And students have followed suit and really do like that. Did I answer? It's hard to say because, you know, in a classroom of students, you always have students who write like 2 words, and then you have students that write paragraphs, and then you have like the ones in the middle. And the middle really is for, especially for an outline, is where you want to be, right? Bulleted points are key. You don't want to write whole sentences at the outline stage. Now later on, yes, the outline stage, I encourage them to stick to the key points, unless if they have thought of a brilliant sentence at that moment, by all means include that on the outline, but that's not the purpose.
I have a question. I am curious. So I have one class where they do have a paper and I use an outline and a rough draft. But I'm just kind of curious where, especially in the freshman level, the genetics course, where do you find that you're giving the bulk of your feedback in terms of like what's, you know, guiding them to the more polished product? Like, would that be the outline or the rough draft? Or
it would be the rough draft. Last year I didn't do the outline just because it was already a wackadoodle year with being hybrid and all the other stuff. Like but this year I do plan on adding that outline piece. And of course I have no graph for this, but I have noticed that students who actually take time and write a better outline, write a better rough draft, you know, as a whole. So in the genetics course, I definitely plan on adding that outline piece. Now, this past year in that Bio 150 freshman class, they do have to write a literature review on a species, like one particular species. They got to answer how it follows all the characteristics of life, because these students have only taken organismal biology at that point. So we kind of pull back from concepts learned in organismal biology, and I do have them do an outline on that. Their outlines are a little easier, so to speak, because like the genetic assignment, I lay out like, how does this particular species undergo or metabolism? You know, what's the form of energy consumption? How is this particular species adapted to its environment? Give me one specific example. So I've laid out the content of their paper that I expect, more so than the biology seminar students. So I do the outline peer review for the freshman 150 class. I just hadn't added it to genetics yet, and I will, because I think that is the piece that I find the biggest payoff. And 10 years ago, if you would have told me that I would have been excited about giving a writing assignment, I would have told you were crazy. Like, but I do enjoy this process.
All right, well, we are just about at the end of our time. Thank you so much, Jen. That was super helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And I hope everyone found it as useful as I did. And like I said earlier, we have these faculty learning community workshops once per session, and typically we do it in person and we do box lunches. So hopefully those, those days will be coming soon. We'll just see what COVID does. Yeah, fingers crossed. So yeah, again, I'll be sending out an email to you all with the materials and a brief survey. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, everyone. Time to get, all right, bye. Where is